Boxing truth here. Back on this mic. It's been a minute. Just the past week, not much has really interested me in boxing. I don't give a shit about bum ass Cali Yafai. I don't give a shit about a protected Jerwin and Conjus right now. I could care less about Canelo'S continued cherry picks, and people want to rate him pound for pound after ducking all of his threats in the super flyweight division. But I do want to talk about Lil G and how he's blatantly ducking the Canelo rematch. It was expected. I expected this all along. Perhaps it is posturing. A little posturing from both sides. But Golovkin has to bow down to Canelo's terms. Otherwise, he's going to have to fight mandatories. And for a lot less than what's being offered at the table for this rematch. It's a pretty simple decision, Lil G. Make over $20 million in the Canelo rematch, or make about $2 million for a mandatory defense. It's a pretty obvious choice here. It's a chance to clear that draw on your resume. It's a chance to get some revenge against Canelo. It's a chance to prove that you're the true middleweight king of the division. It's a fight that puts you back on the limelight in terms of star power and the platform, pay-per-view, everything involved, a legacy type fight. You ain't gonna get no props beating the Derechenkos or the protected Charlos of the world. This is the fight that really matters to Triple G. I mean, only fanboys want to see him fight mandatories. But I'm a boxing fan. I want to see the fights that matter. And right now, this fight matters to me because of what occurred in the first fight, because of who I believe won the fight. But this is why Golovkin is being hesitant about this rematch, demanding ridiculous terms in order for this fight to go through, even though he already agreed to a 35% split, already bowed down to Canelo prior to the canceled fight back in May. So already agreed to these terms. Now he wants to draw a curveball in the negotiations 6 weeks after the fact that when they already agreed upon to most of the series points. Obviously, Golovkin is having second thoughts. Obviously, he's not as confident anymore in that he can beat Canelo Alvarez, which is why he's demanding a split that is pretty much a deal breaker. He knows this is going to derail the fight, which is why he's making this ridiculous demand. How the fuck you think you're going to get 50-50 with Canelo Alvarez? That's like Manny Pacquiao asking 50-50 against Floyd, even though he had more of an argument for a 50-50 split, but he didn't get it in the end. And Golovkin, you're not gonna get it either, dog. You're gonna get the same deal that you agreed to before. Nothing has changed since the fight was canceled, since the scheduled rematch was canceled. It's a pretty obvious decision. Either make your biggest payday, a chance to redeem yourself in a rematch, or fight a mandatory challenger for a lot less and not get the type of props needed if you go on through with those fights. But I get it. You don't want to lose that O. You don't want to get embarrassed. You don't want your reputation tarnished. But I already see right through you, man. You're not the boogeyman. You are not a monster. I saw that over a year ago. I saw what you're capable of. I saw how good you are as a fighter. And I'm not very impressed. There's plenty of guys that could beat you around the super middleweight division, which is why you haven't moved up. David Benavidez will murder you. Billy Joe Saunders, you don't even want that smoke no more. You can pull some strings in case this fight falls apart with Canelo. You can pull some strings. You can pay some step aside money to Jamal Charlo. You could negotiate with the IBF, since a unification bout would trump that mandatory challenge for the IBF. The IBF, I'm sure, would pull some strings in order to bypass that mandatory for unification bout. But you don't want that fight either. You're not pushing for that fight because Abel Sanchez knows you can't beat Billy Joe Saunders. After what he did to David Lemieux, it's just too much of a stylistic nightmare for you to deal with, especially now that you're 36 years old. You're not fast enough, not quick enough, and not a hard enough puncher to deal with Billy Joe Saunders. But this Canelo fight, for you, it's worth to take for a number of reasons. It's your biggest fight. It's your legacy fight. The fight that could really define your career. But you don't want to take it because you know you're not going to win. You know you can't beat Canelo now at this stage. Canelo is going to make it easier this time around. They know it. But they're not going to bend over backwards to make this fight. They're going to give you the terms that you already agreed to. And now, 6 weeks after all the points were agreed upon, you want to throw in a different percentage. You want to throw in a different ridiculous demand. Pretty much pricing yourself out of the rematch. Pretty much making an excuse for not to go through with this fight. Pretty much throwing out a deal breaker, knowing full damn well that this is the type of demand that could kill the fight. I'm still hopeful the fight happens, but you just never know. Golovkin is he's gonna just walk away from the biggest fight of his career. Not because of principle, but because he's afraid of what's gonna happen in a rematch. He's definitely afraid of Canelo Alvarez. Definitely fearful of stepping into the ring with Billy Joe Saunders. So instead, you're going to get Golovkin now in the twilight of his career. Pretty much going to do what Nia Inouye's doing right now. Cherry pick the opponents that they feel that he can beat. His team feel that he can beat. Now, here's the situation. If Golovkin ducks the Canelo rematch, this is what they're going to do. They're not going to fight Billy Joe Saunders. So you Golovkin fanboys can just shut the fuck up about it. Your boy don't want no smoke with the gypsy middleweight. Alright? Tom Loffer already exposed it. They don't want no parts of that fight. So what they're going to do instead, they're going to take on a fighter that's with a style that's more beneficial to them. And among the choices, it's down to 2 choices now. You got Derevyachenko and you got Jamal Charlo. Now that WC is putting pressure on him to fight Charlo if he's not going to agree with the Canelo Alvarez terms. Now, I think the Charlo fight is an interesting fight, but it's a very winnable fight for Golovkin. So I don't view Jamal as the biggest threat to Golovkin in the division, simply because his style suits Golovkin. He'll come forward, he'll be aggressive, he'll try to knock Golovkin out, but his defense is too shaky, and he's never fought a puncher. He hasn't proven that he can take a punch. I mean, what's Jamal Charlo's best one? I like Charlo. I like Jamal Charlo. But the motherfucker hasn't fought anybody, especially in the middleweight division. He knocked out Selecki leftovers, a guy who's been knocked out by Selecki in whatever his name was, Centeno. So the guy already got knocked out by a guy that can't punch. So how really impressive was Charlo's knockout of Centeno? Knocked out a cripple in his middleweight debut. His best win is a 41-year-old Bundrich. And in a hype job and protected Julian Williams. That's who he's fought. He hasn't fought no murderous punchers. Had a life and death struggle with Austin Trout. So, is he really ready for Triple G? Based off the resume, based off the string of wins that he's had, he's looked impressive in a lot of some of those fights. but he didn't look impressive against Austin Trout, and he's had a very weak run towards his mandatory status in the middleweight division. Believe me, Jermall Charlo is not the biggest threat to Golovkin. Not in the middleweight division. And that's the fight I think they will pursue if the Canelo rematch doesn't get made. They're going to appeal the IBF and then take on the WBC mandatory instead, because that style is more suitable to Golovkin, and also Charlo brings more marketability to the table compared to Derevyanchenko. So that's the angle that will be played here. But your boy don't want no smoke with the two elite middleweights, and that's Canelo Alvarez and Billy Joe Saunders. Golovkin can go his separate ways if he wants, but he'll be looked at as a ducker and a pussy for avoiding the top threats in the middleweight division. He could walk away and make far less compared to what he's being offered for the Canelo rematch, and he could put himself at risk to take an L against a young, hungry challenger who does have a puncher's chance in Jermall Charlo in this fight. He may not be ready, may not be seasoned enough, may not be sturdy enough, since this is the biggest puncher he's going to fight in his career if this fight actually does materialize. But Golovkin is he's getting up there in age, man. Already came off an L last year to Canelo, got rocked by an inactive heavy bag, lost the first round to Martirosyan. So how much Golovkin truly has left? It'd be too risky in my eyes to take the lesser fights instead of going out with a bang. It's a for sure L if he goes through a Canelo rematch, but at the very least, he took the biggest risk, the biggest fight that he could take. Risk and glory all put into one instead of just risk against a lesser opponent and lesser mandatory challenger. We'll see what you do, Triple G, Lil G. Either you bow down to Canelo's terms or risk taking an L to a mandatory challenger. It's up to you. This is Boxing Truth. I'm out.